Let me draw again so that we can follow, no? Or at least I can better see.
Opo.
Uh, okay. A, B.
Tama po ba?
The answer?
Opo.
I don't know. Let's see.
Oh no. Suspense.
I mean, Joshua, I read many. Yeah, suspense. But the thing is, I see many problems. So I can't really. I think the vertex angles at B and D. Did you mean 75 degrees?
Opo.
Okay, 75 degrees, and then 105. So this should be 45 degrees, and then what you did, which is rather inspired. So it's a good thing that you did it. Uh, this point E, so that we have here 45 degrees, and this is 60 degrees. AB equals AD is equal to 3. Okay, find the area of ABC. Now, what you did,
It seems rather clean po eh. Kaya I am slightly confident, although not confident at all at the same time.
no, that's fine, that's fine. Okay, let's again. AB, AB, BD, so sine 75, sine 30, AB is 3. So, okay, BD is 3 sine 30 over sine 75. I think what you uh, So, put in the habit of writing degrees for angles. Eventually,
Opo.
kasi when we go to calculus, when, where it's going to be mostly gradients. Now, BD is, so I think what you used here is, well, sine 30 is 1/2. Okay. So BD would be 3 sine 30 degrees over sine of
Oh no.
75 degrees. Tapos, sine 30 is 1/2. Yeah, so 3 halves in the numerator. And then sine 75 degrees is something that I never
Ito po.
remember.
Square root of 6.
Pero
Square root of 2 all over 4.
square root of 6. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to assume that you used the right value. So, yeah, it's just an issue of using it naman. So, okay, so BD, the computation of BD is correct because you were thinking of using, but yes, the expression is too complicated if you're going to use Heron's formula. Now, so we go to ADE for now. So DE is 3/2, yes, making AE 3 square root of 3 over 2. So that ADE is half of 3/2 and 3 square root of 3 over 2, 9 square root of 3 over 8. So that's correct. That's correct. And then um, in C, D, E, D, E, and EC are the same. So 3/2, 9 over 8. That's correct. So we have,
Woo! Then,
oh, um, then what you did is you didn't show any more of the work here for the Heron's formula computation, but you got 9 over 4. Is that what happened?
abo.
Okay. Pero next time, kung nandun na, kasi so I mean, how did you end up with 9 over 4? You did the work anyway, right? Sinulat mo
I,
din naman. Is that correct?
I
Okay.
just used the decimal approximation and then I found out that it's like I just used
Eh,
I didn't actually use the approximation per se. But I just found out po lumabas po 9/4.
but then 9 fourths is 2.25. Who knows? Maybe you actually ended up with 2.2499999.
Oh no.
Diba?
The
So it's a
16
so
din
that's it's the same thing. There is a way of doing this exactly.
Wait.
And even though it is tedious, the act of doing it is part of your training.
Ah,
Okay?
I have a genius idea po. split it into a
Sige, what?
15, I split it into a 15, 75, 90 triangle. I will calculate the altitude and then I can just use the one half something, one half BH formula. Ah,
Yes, that's one way to do it. But also, remember the following.
no.
Um, Alpha, B, C. So this is A. The area is equal to 1/2 BC sine alpha.
What?
Did
I
we
forgot
did
about that. No.
Yeah, because
I must
one of
listen.
the angles is 30 degrees. So all you really have to do here is half 3 times 3 times sine 30 degrees.
No.
Yes.
I
Didn't
was
you?
fooled. What have I
9 over
done?
4.
What have I done? I went through all of this pain just
Okay.
for this little formula to beat me.
Yeah, 2 lines. 2 lines. Actually, well, because I was running out of space. That could have been a single line. Okay. So I understand there are a lot of formulas, but I mean, you recognize this formula, right? So the issue is not that you didn't know it, but rather, we just keep on going at it, keep on doing and doing and doing things because sometimes our default methods are to use Heron's formula or to use to find theta, but by taking the arc cosine or the arc sine. So we sometimes have those default moves, all right, but by exposing ourselves to problems like this, we get more used to those other options. Okay.
Fa- familiarity po eh, no? Na,
Uh,
when to
Oh
use
my
the,
gosh, this is the key to the other problem.
okay, sige, okay, then I'll let you work on. Okay, sige, the other problem then. Sige. And for Feb 19, I left you with. Oh, okay. So the problem that was about a function and its own inverse. Sige, let's not discuss the entirety of the solution, but let me have a look at. All right, 274,
Ow!
ay sorry, dyan may solution din.
Huh? Ano solution?
Yung sinasabi mo, hindi.
Ano ito? Parang labo yan. Sa picture po, may ano rare ito po na. May na-form po na more pattern sa picture po. Ahaha.
dito na.
Opo. May
Sorry, what's
na-form po
ano
na
nung
more pattern. Ganda.
sorry, what was formed?
Yung more pattern po.
Sa ano?
Ano nasa upper right?
Opo. Meron po na po.
Yun, parang ang galing. As I wonder what happened. Is that with the? I mean, how did it not happen with the other pictures? Okay, anyway, show that the function is 1-to-1. All right. So to present the argument, we start with stating, suppose f of x1 equals f of x2. Okay. We will show that x1 equals x2. All right. So f of x1 equals f of x2. So ito na yon. And then it's actually this part is okay. So there's something that needs to be discussed here.
Oh no.
But let me just check. Minus k x1 minus 7k minus k x2. All right. Okay. I realized a mistake
No.
in the question itself. In the question itself.
Yes!
So something I failed to write down. But then it's because you should the ideal situation is you were able to point it out in your solution. I realized the mistake because there is something wrong with the solution. Ganito. It's this. It's this equation. What we want to happen, what we want as a consequence of that is x1 to be equal to x2, which is the last line. So
But
Joshua,
if
tell
k is
me,
equal to -7, then
yes.
I knew
All
it, I
right,
knew it, I knew it. That's the problem I
mhm.
was thinking.
Okay, what if k is -7?
Oh no.
Now, so I was thinking, I should have added, okay, where k is not equal to -7.
Kung k will
But,
become
but the,
-7, fx will become 1. So it's a
yeah,
vertical line.
hmm. And is this a one-to-one function?
Technically, yata po.
We would have to go back to the definition. For any value in the range, is the value of x responsible for it unique? So kumbaga, this is the prime. This is the output.
One,
Can we
oh, one,
identify
one value of x is responsible for, wait, yeah,
for
one
the
value,
output?
an infinite number of, values for x. I interpreted it wrong po. I thought po it was like x equals 1, so it will be a vertical line. It turns out it's a y equals 1, which will become a horizontal line. So it literally fails
Horizontal.
the
Yes.
horizontal line in line test in every way possible.
Yes, absolutely. It fails the horizontal line test. I mean, hey, f of 7 equals f of 11 because they're both equal to 1, but no one's saying that 7 is equal to 11 because that's absolutely false. So a constant function, any constant function is not one-to-one because, well, as you said, it fails the horizontal line test in any way possible, and also because of the definition. So to avoid the function f being a constant function, k should not be equal to -7. So that should have been part of the conditions of the problem.
If
K
x po
is
is
not equal to,
if x po naman is -7 by for some reason, then that will become equal to 0. Therefore, there is
yeah,
not one to
oh.
one.
So okay lang kasi if you think of uh, who is responsible for making the output 0, it's only -7 as a value of x. So it doesn't violate the one-to-one nature of the function.
I see.
So at any rate, k should have been stated right from the beginning as not being equal to -7.
Opo.
Maybe I should have stated it here. Okay.
Well, so
That
technically
k,
po, kung ganun, then it means I'm correct. Like,
yes. So sa tama
saved by
to.
the bell.
But then you would argue. No, you should argue. Okay, note that k is not equal to -7, so k plus 7 is not equal to 0. And therefore, you can divide by k plus 7.
Opo. So, incomplete pa po yan. I
Yeah,
seemingly can't see
incomplete
the value.
pa ito. Okay,
Opo.
but what was it a hint that you wanted?
Mm, maybe. Maybe po.
Okay, ganito. What does it mean for two functions f and g to be the same.
When,
Dapat,
Opo. When the
they should
outputs
have,
when the outputs
okay.
from the same inputs give when the outputs from the same inputs are the same.
Yeah, yeah. All right. The domain of f and of g are the same. And yeah, f of x is equal to g of x for any x. So meaning you can replace x by anything and the equation should still be true.
Hmm.
We should be able to replace x with anything and the resulting equation should still be true.
Huh. That is I think
Clue
I
na.
think I think
Does it give you ideas?
I think I already know what's going to happen.
All
Uh,
right, then that's as far as I will go then.
it's kumbaga, it's ano po yung tawag doon? Yung parang may sinabi po kayo, parang you can say it in front of the enemy, but then the enemy won't know you're actually sending messages.
Oh, it's right under your nose, something like that.
Opo.
Okay, sige. Anyway, I'm gonna give you the chance and time to think about that. And so, well, we are. So yeah, so something to ponder, something to consider. Let's talk about what we have done so far. So we talked about one-to-one functions
And
and what the inverse of function is.
sir, may tanong po
Okay.
ako regarding
Yes,
sa tanong ni
sure.
Joshua. Kasi tanong siya ng tanong, sabi niya kung which is A, di ba po doon sa pinadala niyang tanong sa inyo? Sabi ko,
Yeah,
I think if I will be the one to solve that, I will assume it is one of the either of the acute angles, di ba po?
mm-mm.
Kasi,
But I realized that I should have mentioned it in the problem.
okay. Pero kung may
Pero nung
problem na
nakita
gano'n,
ko,
any po pag gano'n, either, kung may problem na gano'n.
so well, um, parang ano, shortcoming talaga ko talaga dapat na mention ko in a problem like that. Something a detail like that should be specified.
Okay po.
So nalimutan ko lang i-specify that A should be one of the two acute angles. Now, would it matter which acute angle is being considered? You Joshua, can think about that. But basta, it's not the right angle, eh? Kasi if A is 90 degrees and the twice A is 180 degrees, then you already know the sign, which is zero. So nothing really
I'm
to
pretty
talk
sure po
about
yung,
there.
kung yung ano po, yung correct na solution ko po dun, I'm pretty sure is wrong. Pero anyway,
Uh,
a proof is still a proof.
Okay. So anyway, ito, you should have enough fuel to continue this problem. Okay? Okay. So we're talking about one-to-one functions, and that example is an illustration of a one-to-one function. And which functions have an inverse? I'm scrolling back up. Okay, so I initially thought of starting with cosine and sine function graphs, also with the tangent, cotangent, but I think you've already seen those. So one noteworthy thing about the graph of the cosine and sine functions is that they are not one-to-one. They all fail the horizontal line test because they are periodic functions. Actually, any periodic function will fail the horizontal line test. Any periodic function is not one-to-one. And what is the relevance of one-to-one functions in our discussion? Because only one-to-one functions have an inverse. This theorem that I pointed out here, it's an if and only if statement, meaning the two parts it's relating are going to be enough to imply the other. So if a function has an inverse, then according to this theorem, that function is one-to-one. And vice versa, if a function happens to be one-to-one, then according to this theorem, this function is going to have an inverse.
Is the converse true po?
In a theorem which is if and only if, it is its own converse. Or actually, ganito. An if and only if statement is a combination of two statements, a statement, an implication, and its converse. So
Ah.
ito, statement. Ang converse niya, B implies A. Many times, even if a statement is true, it doesn't follow that its converse is true. However, if the converse happens to be true, then you could say A if and only if B. They both imply the other, which means they are equivalent to each other.
Ah.
All right? Parang ano, sa logic, ito, here's an implication. So statement,
Oh no, back to booleans.
di ba, if n is divisible by 6, then it is even. Okay, pero nung converse niya, it's not true that if n is even, then it's divisible by 6, then 6 divides n. So the converse is not true, and the statement is true, right? But sometimes a converse may be true. And in that case, you can relate them by that if and only if description. So I wasn't able to justify bakit ng mga inverse functions sila precisely ang mga one-to-one functions. Okay. Maybe next time, after na lang ng discussion natin ng mga inverse trigonometric functions, and also when we get to exponential functions and logarithmic functions.
Oh no, when it is scaled up by literally exponentially.
Medyo baligtad nga nagsimula tayo sa trigonometry. Typically, we would start pre-calculus with mga functions, polynomial functions, and then parang nag-jump tayo forward to trigonometric functions. I started from a different direction. But okay lang. We could always go back to these functions and discuss them at a deeper level.
Opo.
Okay. So f of x equal to cosine of x is not a one-to-one function. So it has no inverse. This is true. All right. The cosine function itself has no inverse. But where do we get?
Is it misleading to say yung inverse cosine is cosine negative 1x?
Sorry, what's that?
Is it misleading?
Is it misleading?
Is the notation kind of misleading because yung is the same notation to denote inverses when technically it's not even the real inverse?
I wouldn't say it's misleading. It's the most practical notation. But what we need to consider is a particular point of view that when we write cosine inverse of x, it's a particular version of the cosine function which has an inverse. Ganito, if you're going to describe a function f as just the cosine function, and you're not going to mention anymore what the domain is, the assumption is that the domain here is the set of all real numbers. All right. So meaning the entire graph would be the usual entire graph of the cosine function. Ito. So ito ng graph. And this is definitely a graph that's going to fail the horizontal line test. But instead, what we are going to do is, hold on, I should have made the drawing larger. Okay, because there is something that I wish to extract from the graph. Ito. 1, and then -1, and then we have pi over 2 pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Of course, this extends further. Okay, let me 3 pi, and then 4 pi, and then, okay, dito hanggang -pi. So the graph looks like this. Cosine 0 is 1. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to restrict the domain. Restrict the domain to the following. Cosine is positive. Sandali lang, hold on. Sine y is positive. Oh, okay, got it. Restrict the domain to the following interval, 0 to pi. So that interval on the x-axis is this, 0 to pi. And so what we're going to do is consider only this particular portion of the graph. So ito lang. So from here to that point, yun lang na i-consider natin. Okay. And so the effect is that when you draw it, okay, andito nung 1, andito nung -1, and then here is pi over 2, and here is pi. You then get these points. So the function f equal to cosine of x, well, for which we consider the following domain. Domain of f is the interval from 0 to pi, okay, whose graph is what's shown. So ano pinagkaiba nito doon sa function sa taas? The domain is the set of all real numbers, but this time we're only considering 0 to pi, which means the graph is only this particular green portion. Now this function is 1-to-1. This has an inverse. Ito ang merong inverse. Okay, because this is 1-to-1. And because it has an inverse, then we can identify that inverse. That is then the arc cosine function or the cosine inverse function. But so it's clear, let me put here the range, also in green. Okay. The range of f is, so sa ano naman, makikita natin, nung shadow of the green graph on the y-axis start from -1 onwards to +1, so that's the range. Okay. So definition, okay, the inverse cosine function is defined as y equal to cosine superscript x, where, okay, the domain will be the range of the function f in green. Okay, so given the function f in green, kukunan natin ng inverse. So magkakapalit ng domain and range. So the range of f is -1, 1. That will then be our domain. So x is from -1 to 1. And because the domain of f is from 0 to pi, then that means the range of this new function will be 0 to pi. Y is from 0 onwards to pi. And how is the graph then going to look like? Well, we bisect the first quadrant by the line with equation y equals x.
What? I was right. My hypothesis was true.
That what?
Ano po, it's just naively the flip the graph over the...
Oh, but yeah, but we also talked about that last time, right? Bakit dun sa inverse, we simply flip. Andito yan, di ba? Nung kasi,
How would that look
if...
like po? It's kind of...
Sige. Well, actually, that's what we're going to do. Hinahanap ko lang where I had it here for the inverse where there's a flipping. Oh yeah, andito pala. All right. So if AB is a point on the graph of F, then we show that BA will be a point on the graph of the inverse. And BA and AB are reflections of each other, mirror images of each other, where the mirror is the line y equals x. So how's the graph going to look like? I understand sometimes it can get to be so confusing, but what I do is, whatever is on the line y equals x, it's going to stay there. It will be its own mirror image. What I do is, okay, I look at the range of the original, -1, 1. That will be the domain of the inverse. Wait, what is pi over 2? Pi over 2 is around 3.14 divided by 2, so 1.57. You know what? Let me reconstruct this drawing so that
it's getting that to scale na po.
Kasi it's not scaled so parang hindi natin makikita nung okay, just do the whole thing all over again.
When the copy paste doesn't work anymore po.
Yeah, nga eh. So, dapat okay. So I should be able to capture pi as well. So let's say here is where 1 is, 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then here is -1, and then pi is going to be slightly there. Baba natin para meron pang space pi.
Where's pi gonna be?
1, 2, and then 3. It's just a bit annoying lang na we're gonna have to approximate the location of pi here on both axes. So
gagawin niyo po, cut it into 2 po, then cut those half sections into 4 para makuha niyo po 3.1, then put it halfway after po yung 3.1 para makuha niyo po approximately 3.15. It is close naman.
Basta medyo close na to 4, basta hindi na super so anyway, for the original function, okay, so nandito siya sa 1, tapos pi, and then 3.14 is slightly after 3, and then I need to say -1, and then pi over 2 is around 1.57, so somewhere here. So this would be the graph of tapos y equals x.
Oh no, it's becoming to scale.
Yeah, gonna try our best. Okay.
Me, after realizing po Desmos actually exists.
Yeah, pero andito na eh. Desmos, GeoGebra, you can, all right. Tapos for the inverse, so I'm deciding what color I want to use. So yeah, let's use red. Okay. So this should be part of the graph. And then, so in nung x-intercept and y-intercept, they're going to be partners. Tapos ito, this is part of it. And
Wait,
then
it just goes
the
up?
part in the fourth quadrant should be reflected somewhere here in the second quadrant. Okay, giving us the following.
What? It just goes up. It's like ano po yung it's like yung part ng y equals cosine x. Ay, hindi. It's part of po of x equals cosine.
All right. So there you go. So the graph in red, this is the graph of, this is f inverse of x. This is cosine inverse of x.
So
All
nga
right.
po, it's like,
So if you tilt your head,
abo, it's like part of, it's like, is it part po of x equals cosine y?
what's that? You're choppy. You're a little bit choppy.
Abo, is x part of cosine y po? Is that part of x equals cosine y?
What do you mean x equals cosine? Oh yeah, well, okay, ganito. If y is cosine inverse of x. Okay. Oh, hold on. So yeah, I should have mentioned, sorry. Oh gosh, the important part of the definition.
Where? Huh?
Because I just wrote y equals cosine x, but what you mentioned, if and only if. So when is y equals cosine x? So that means x is cosine of y. And then where x has to be.
No. It's real.
And yeah. I need to move this a little bit further.
Para pong jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. Okay. And then since before we jump into computations, why don't we talk about the sine inverse function? So let us draw again. So hopefully medyo mas mabilis because I'm gonna do this.
No.
Yes.
No. It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen, but let's see if. Wait.
I already knew what's impending. Yes!
Well,
What? No.
not okay.
You're still taken advantage of.
Definitely. Okay. But the. Okay, yes.
Wow!
Okay. So for the sine function in blue, so it starts at the origin as sine of 0 is 0. So we get something like this. Okay. So anyway, we know it's not the graph of a one-to-one function.
Huh?
Eh, natinamad na ako, di ko na itutuloy. Okay. Yeah. So the entire graph is not one-to-one. So what we're going to do is we're going to restrict the domain. Restrict the domain to the interval negative pi over 2 going to pi over 2. Nasaan yun? On the x-axis here. Negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So that means the portion of the graph that we're going to take is this. And observe how this green portion is going to pass the horizontal line test. So the original version of the sine function, it has no inverse. But when we make that restriction, we're going to have an inverse. So let me write down f of x equal to sine of x, where the domain of f is a set of all real numbers, has no inverse. Okay, but what we're going to do is, okay, take f of x equal to sine of x and consider the following smaller set as its domain. Negative pi over 2 going to pi over 2. So the range of f is still from negative 1 to positive 1. This function with restricted domain, this is the function which has an inverse. Okay, and because we spent a good deal of time with the drawing earlier,
No!
let's not put that to waste. Yes, yes, yes. Let's not put that to waste. Of course, there is something.
But that was copy too. I still win.
But it would be so much easier to erase the parts that we don't need.
There must be an erasure. There must be an erasure. Yes!
Oh no. Okay.
Win.
No.
What? It's picking out. It's picking out rose hips from the thorns.
Okay. I'm just gonna cover it. Okay.
No, Bill.
Okay. So for the sine function, let's take. Actually, we need it on the. Okay, negative pi over 2 going to pi over 2. So we need to extend here pala. So this is negative 2. Okay. And then so the green portion, negative pi over 2, the negative 1. So ito. Down here. And then okay. So when we take the reflection, okay, it would still pass through the origin, okay, but then it would end up, the partner point is going to be here. Okay. Kasi itong point na to, itong green, at level 1 and negative 1. So when we take the reflection, it should be here. So nandito, and also here. So, all right. So that's a graph of the sine inverse function. So f inverse of x equals sine inverse of x. So let me write down formally the definition, also realizing that the x-axis and y-axis, they're longer than what's needed. Okay, so let me complete it for now and put it back above.
No.
Yes.
It is a move. Yes.
Okay, just move. Okay, ano pa ba na sinulat ko? Hey, even the definition.
What?
Yes. Okay,
No.
it's the height of laziness, my friend. Okay, ito.
No.
The inverse sine function is is defined as, okay, sine inverse of x if and only if, so ibig sabihin, if y is sine inverse of x, ibig sabihin
Ah!
x is
Ina-erase po na hindi kailangan.
sine of y. Okay, but ganito. For the original function, the sine function, the range, that's going to become our domain. So yes, x is still from -1 to 1, but the domain of the sine function, the restriction from -pi over 2 to pi over 2, that will then be used for the bounds of the range. So y is going to run from -pi over 2 until pi over 2. So in fact, if you look at the red graph, the lowest point niya has y coordinate. The lowest red point has y coordinate -pi over 2. The highest red point has y coordinate pi over 2. Okay, so let's familiarize ourselves with computations. So example, what is cosine inverse of negative square root of 3 over 2? Okay. What is cosine inverse of negative square root of 3 over 2? So the idea is that because this is a cosine inverse, think of the result as an angle. So we're looking for an angle theta such that cosine of theta is negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Now, there are in fact infinitely many angles whose cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Now, because cosine theta is negative, that means theta is in either the second or third quadrants. And once you have identified that angle, you can add 2 pi or subtract 2 pi. You could go complete revolutions further, and the cosine would still be negative square root of 3 over 2. But because of the definition of cosine inverse, there should only be one angle that we are going to use. And going back to the definition, y equals cosine inverse of x. So the value of y, think of that as the angle. The angle should be between 0 and pi. So that means y is in the first and second quadrants. Let me point out, okay, it would make it easier to remember, okay, that the condition y from 0 to pi implies that sine of y is greater than or equal to 0.
Opo.
Alright, so parang isipin natin, nung sine function, siya nung partner ng cosine, whose inverse is centerpiece in this definition. And for the cosine inverse function, the angle it's supposed to throw back at us is that angle for which the partner function, sine of y, will be greater than or equal to 0. Ito naman, with y between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, that means the angle y thrown by sine inverse is in quadrants 4 or 1. And that the implication is that the partner function cosine of y is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so ganito. Cosine theta is negative square root of 3 over 2. So this means theta is in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3. However, because theta is a cosine inverse function, then that means the partner function sine should be greater than or equal to 0. So using that criterion, should theta be in the second quadrant or third quadrant?
Uh, Second quadrant.
All right. Okay. Theta should be in the second quadrant since sine of theta should be greater than or equal to 0. All right. Kasi there is actually a specific choice for the for the restriction of the domain. Ganito, no? Going back to the cosine function, we realized to end up with a one-to-one function, we have to restrict the domain. And we chose 0 to pi, so that the green graph there in the first drawing would pass the horizontal line test. But then, one might be led to think, but hindi ito bakit hindi ito nung ginamit natin? From negative pi going to 0. Well, I suppose one might say, mas maganda nung positive eh. Or how about, why don't we use ito from pi onwards to 2 pi? Bakit hindi yan nung i-reflect natin across the line y equals x? All right. There are various reasons behind the choice of restriction, why it's 0 to pi, but it is not actually a coincidence that this was chosen so that the sine function will be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, it is going to be a useful fact in calculus that for the cosine inverse function, the sine of y will be greater than or equal to 0. So that's going to be useful in calculus, something that we are not prepared to discuss now. But there's a reason behind these things. Okay, so ito, we're looking for an angle in the second quadrant. Tapos its cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. So gawin natin, isip tayo, well, cosine of x equal to square root of 3 over 2. So the absolute value ang ginamit natin. Give me an angle in the first quadrant whose cosine is square root of 3 over 2.
30, 60, 90 triangle. 30.
30. All right. 30 in radians, what is it?
Pi over 2 radians, pi over pi radians 180, pi over 2 radians, pi over 6 radians po.
Pi over 6. All right. So ibig sabihin, the angle in the second quadrant that we're looking for, its reference angle is pi over 6. So what then is this angle in the second quadrant?
Pi over 6.
Yeah, 5 pi over 6. Therefore, cosine inverse of negative square root of 3 over 2 is equal to 5 pi over 6.
Wow.
All right. It's equal to 5 pi over 6. Yes, it's helpful to think of a cosine inverse as an angle, but this time, kasi, it needs to be definite what the output is. So do we put it as 30 degrees or is it 5 pi over 6? If there is a geometry application, then 30 degrees is acceptable. But otherwise, the default is radians. 5 pi over 6 is the answer. That is the cosine inverse, or the arc cosine, of negative square root of 3 over 2. Next example. Evaluate the following. Sine inverse of sine of 3 pi over 4. Question. Is it not 3 pi over 4? I think we discussed this paradoxical situation a couple of days back. The answer is not necessarily going to be 3 pi over 4. Well, it could be, but let's see. So, ganito. First off, what is the sine of 3 pi over 4?
Um, 3 pi over 4 po is out of range.
No, it should be within range. Right now, don't think yet of sine inverse. We're only focusing on this thing inside. I mean, it should be possible to find the sine of 720 degrees. It's possible to find the sine of negative 5,000 degrees. So it should be possible to find the sine of 3 pi over 4. So sa kanan ng mga out of range considerations, one step at a time. What is the sine of 3 pi over 4? If it helps, in which quadrant can we find 3 pi over 4?
3, pi over 4, 9, pi, pi over 4, 45, 3 pi. So that's 135?
Oh, 135 in quadrant number,
Second quadrant po. Quadrant number
second quadrant. Can you now give me what the sine of 3 pi over 4? If you want, consider what is its reference angle.
45. So
Okay.
it's the same as sine 45.
Yeah.
Which
Which is
is square root of 2 over 2.
yeah, square root of 2 over 2. Okay, now. So this is an angle theta that we're interested in. And so that means sine theta is equal to the square root of 2 over 2. Okay. This theta that we're looking for, so taking everything into consideration, in which quadrant are we looking at?
Second quadrant po.
Well, 3 pi over 4 is in the second quadrant. But now just take sine inverse square root of 2 over 2. Okay, keeping in mind that, hey, theta is a sine inverse value, which means cosine of theta should be greater. Yeah.
So if it's greater than 0, it can be in the second quadrant. So it must be in the first quadrant. And the only one
Yes.
the only sign that has that value is 45 degrees.
Yes. So what is our answer? Is it 3 pi over 4?
Pi over 4 po.
Yes. So is it not 3 pi over 4? Nope, it's not. Okay. So yes, okay, sine inverse of sine of 3 pi over 4 is not 3 pi over 4, but rather it is equal to pi. Okay, so one more example. So, what is cosine inverse of the cosine of 8 pi over 7? This time, I chose 8 pi over 7 because unlike the previous example where it was easy to figure out the sine of 3 pi over 4 exactly, this time we are not going to be able to figure out cosine of 8 pi over 7 exactly.
No.
Then we're going to think of this as an angle theta. Okay, and cosine theta should be equal to the cosine of 8 pi over 7. Now, so that's aside, this angle theta, where did this angle theta, the unique output, in which quadrant are we going to find it?
Third.
Don't think necessarily of 8 pi over 7 yet. For now, because theta is a cosine inverse value, the cosine inverse produces angles in which quadrants?
First and fourth.
First and fourth?
Yun pala po yung when x is positive, yun pala yung cosine.
Oh, pero ito,
When sine is positive.
yes.
First
So that means, okay, since theta is a cosine inverse of something, then theta is in quadrants 1 or 2. All right? Because sine theta should be greater than or equal to 0. Okay. Now, let's decide, where is theta between quadrants 1 or 2? Can we decide, is it in the first or is it in the second quadrant?
You can tell po as of now.
Well, we should, because cosine theta is the cosine of 8 pi over 7.
Okay, so the x should be the same. X should, the cosine of 8 pi over 7 is negative, should be in the second quadrant.
Yeah, so the cosine of 8 pi, how do you know this is negative?
Kasi po, it dips into the third quadrant where the x.
Yes. All right. So 8 pi over 7 is in the third quadrant, but theta is not in the third quadrant because it could only be from quadrants 1 or 2. So can we make a decision now?
Opo, second quadrant. So, kung nasa...
All right. Theta is definitely in the second quadrant. Okay. And it has the same cosine as 8 pi over 7. Okay. And you're right. 8 pi over 7 is in the third quadrant. So, dito ng 8 pi over 7. Okay. But the angle we're looking for is in the second quadrant, and it has the same cosine. So meaning, nung intersection points sila in the unit circle are the same. This is what we need. That's the theta we're after. Okay. What does this theta and 8 pi over 7 have in common?
So 8 pi over 7 po, dips, actually just by common sense din po, 8 pi over 7 dips into the third quadrant by pi over 7. So, theta should be a little over the x-axis by pi over 7.
So therefore, what is theta?
6 pi over 7.
Yes, 6 pi over 7. Okay, so therefore, cosine inverse of the cosine of 8 pi over 7 is equal to 6 pi over 7. All right, got it?
The paradox has been solved.
Yeah, okay, so observation. Okay. It's not always true that cosine inverse of cosine x equals x, or that sine inverse of sine of x is always going to be equal to x. Okay, it's not always going to be. Okay. Because when you're using the cosine inverse, there is a restriction that's being considered as far as the domain and range is concerned. However, when you write cosine of x, dito sa loob, where I put that bracket, the restriction is not being considered. So pwede nung x lumabas whatever domain and range is being used for cosine inverse. Okay, so ganito. Example. So observe that even though this is a discussion on the inverse trigonometric functions, and I know that a lot of students are trigger happy with using their calculators for inverse sine and inverse cosine computations, we are not going to use calculators today. Instead, what we will be using is a lot of copy pasting on the notebook, which you so like very much. Yun ang gagawin natin. Walang calculators.
Nag-plot twist po yun. Oh no.
Alright, ito. evaluate the cosine of sine inverse of -1/2 plus sine inverse of 1/4 without using a calculator because we want to figure this out exactly. Okay,
There's no way this is
now
possible.
ganito. So if you're going to use a calculator, I'm sure what a student would do is calculate sine inverse of -1/2 and sine inverse of 1/4, and then figure out that sum. Now that sum is going to be an angle. And ultimately, it's not really that angle that we need, but the cosine of that angle. So what we're going to do is, we're going to figure out the
When the calculator just displays decimal digits, it means it cannot do it inside the assured form.
ito. Okay.
All is lost.
These two sine inverses, let's replace them with variables. Let this be alpha, let this be beta. Okay, because then that means our interest lies in finding cosine of alpha plus beta. Okay, so that means this is what we want, the cosine of alpha plus beta. And this is equal to, from one of the formulas in the past, cosine alpha, cosine beta, minus sine alpha, sine beta. All right, remember that?
Oh no.
Diba?
All
Okay.
coming back
Oh,
together.
yeah. Ultimately, it's a cosine of alpha plus beta that we need, the cosine of a sum. And so you could expand that into this particular difference. And there are 4 trigonometric expressions here on the right side. We should already be able to fill out some of them because, well, for one thing, alpha is sine inverse of -1/2. And so that means sine alpha is -1/2. So this thing, that's -1/2. Now, beta is sine inverse of 1/4, which means right away that sine of beta is equal to 1/4.
No.
So that last expression is 1/4. So we are subtracting the product -1/2 times 1/4. So do you now see the only remaining things we need to look for? Cosine alpha and cosine beta. But hey, don't we have sine alpha, -1/2? So this should be useful in figuring out what cosine alpha should be equal to from the fundamental Pythagorean identity. Diba? Cosine squared alpha is 1 minus sine squared alpha, giving us 1 minus 1/4 or 3/4. But that means cosine alpha could be one of these two things, plus or minus the square root of 3/2. Now, cosine of alpha cannot be both these numbers at the same time. We have to make a choice. And that would be the more subtle part of this solution. The computation is easy. Madali lang yun eh. Mag-square, mag-subtract sa 1, mag-take ng square root. But now
When the
we have,
theoretic part slowly creeps in.
of course, I mean, that's what we're after because the computational part is something that you can already do on your own just fine. So ganito, how do we figure it out? Of course, I'm going to let you think about this and come up with the answer on your own. But keep in mind, where did alpha come from? It's a sine inverse.
Oh no. Green box alert.
So we're going to go back to that device, that tip that I told you. All right. If y is a cosine inverse, then that means sine of y is positive or 0. And from the second definition, if y is a sine inverse, then the partner cosine of y should be positive or 0. So back to the current problem, alpha is a sine inverse. What's the implication?
It means the cosine of that. No, it means
Co-
the cosine.
Cosine of alpha
Cosine
is,
of alpha is positive.
yeah, greater than or equal to
Or
0.
actually
And
zero.
so,
But it can't be zero pala. Kasi if it must
I
be.
yeah, all right. Pero clearly from sine inverse of -1/2, it's not one of the angles in the x or y axis. So yeah, actually cosine of alpha in this case is positive. So therefore, we should be able to make a decision. Okay. Since cosine alpha is positive, then cosine alpha is the square root of 3 over 2. Okay. And that's going to be by a similar reason. So let me put in here square root of 3 over 2. So the only other thing we need is cosine of beta, but it's a very similar story. Cosine squared beta, 1 minus sine squared beta, 1 minus 1 over 16. So 15 over 16, which means cosine beta is plus or minus the square root of 15 over 4, which is which? The positive answer or the negative answer?
Positive po.
All right, because beta is a sine inverse, therefore cosine of beta should be greater than or equal to 0. And since cosine of beta is positive, then the cosine of beta is the square root of 15 over 4. And just like that, we have all the numbers that we need, nothing more, nothing less. We did not have to figure out the angles alpha and beta by any approximation whatsoever. And everything that we have done here guarantees that everything here is exact. The square root of 45 minus -1 plus 1 over 8. 45 is 9 times 5, so we have 3 square root of 5 plus 1 over 8. That's the exact answer. If you use a calculator, it's only going to churn out a decimal approximation. But we know this is
Oh.
exactly what it is.
It's real. It's the
Using the
same value that I got earlier.
okay. Oh, you tried your calculator?
Opo.
You tried, but of course, did the calculator give you the exact value or approximation lang? Syempre, approximation lang. Right? But we have a way of figuring it out, things like this exactly. Okay, ito. Another example. Prove that cosine inverse of x is equal to pi over 2 minus sine inverse of x for any x in their domain. Anyway, ang domain nila ay parehong -1 all the way to +1. So, okay, they are compatible, that they have the same domain. Okay, so how are we going to prove this? It's going to be similar to what we had earlier. No mga cosine inverse and sine inverse. Let's represent them by a variable. So then these variables would represent angles. Ito, let this be alpha. Let this be beta. So let me write down. Let alpha be cosine inverse of x and beta sine inverse of x. Ano kailangan natin i-prove? We have to prove that alpha plus beta is equal to pi over 2. Okay. Mamaya maglalagay ako ng mga dagdag na things for you to prove and solve. Okay, kasi after all, we have only been talking about the sine inverse and cosine inverse functions. There are 4 other trigonometric functions, but we are not going to go into full detail and full blast into all of them.
Yes, yes.
Okay. But
Kala
we
ko
are
po,
still gonna discuss them.
kala ko po may magkakaroon. May verse sign, the inverse verse sign,
Oh
inverse.
yeah, I heard about those things, pero they are not as often used anymore. Parang nakikita ko lang sa Wikipedia ng mga archaic trigonometric functions. But anyway,
Ganun po,
for
pero parang ilan articles per, is ba siguro one article po per 2 years or something.
ng mga ganon, nung
Opo.
sa about those trigonometric functions, they are admittedly rather interesting. All right, parang why did they fall into disuse? So parang ano, I would imagine after some time hindi na sila masyadong nagagamit.
Opo.
Okay. Ito, alpha plus beta equals pi over 2. Ngayon, actually, ang pinagkaiba nito sa previous example, so ito, effectively, ang pinuprove, kailangan natin i-prove, cosine inverse of x plus sine inverse of x is pi over 2. Ito nung kailangan natin i-prove. Nung kanina, it's not quite the same kasi it wasn't figuring out the value of alpha plus beta, but earlier it was find out the cosine of alpha plus beta. Ito this time, it's alpha plus beta that we have to prove is equal to pi over 2. Okay? Isa sa mga pwede natin gawin dito, well, we want to show that alpha plus beta is pi over 2. So either we show, we will look at, well, if alpha plus beta is pi over 2, what would its cosine be? Well, if alpha plus beta is pi over 2, then its cosine must be the cosine of pi over 2, which is the cosine of 90 degrees, 0. Or alternatively, let's look at the sine of alpha plus beta. If alpha plus beta was pi over 2, then its sine would be equal to 1. All right. So to bring us a step closer into proving this, let's choose one. Gawin natin, ano, let's show, let's have a look at sine of alpha plus beta. Okay. But anyway, kailangan natin ng mga trigonometric functions of alpha and beta. We know alpha is cosine inverse of x. So that means x is cosine of alpha. We would need an expression for sine alpha. All right. So sine squared alpha is 1 minus cosine squared alpha. So this would be 1 minus x squared, which would mean sine alpha is plus or minus the square root of 1 minus x squared. Okay, so sine alpha is plus or minus the square root of 1 minus x squared. And then in making the decision, we observe that, oh, hey, because alpha is cosine inverse of x, it means that sine of alpha is greater than or equal to 0. So this means sine of alpha must be the principal square root, 1 minus x squared. All right. This is because sine alpha is greater than or equal to 0. So I hope I'm able to impart that we are not making a choice between various options, positive or negative, based only on what's convenient. Kasi mas convenient kung positive kung kukunin natin Merong reason, everything that we do. Okay. A lot of college students, ginagawa nila, pipiliin nila, positive kasi yun ang maganda, yun ang nice But I always call them out for it kasi, well, but there has to be a deeper reason. Mathematics, parang the answer isn't the answer simply because it's nice. Okay, the answer is the answer because it really is. Oh, diba?
Mathematicians really make things that they just assume to be true.
Well, I mean, at some point you have to assume certain things to be true, but once you've laid them down, everything should be justified.
Opo.
Justifiable. Ito x is sine beta. So I think
Minus 1 pala.
ito, eventually, ganito, cosine beta will be plus or minus the square root of 1 minus x squared pa rin. Yeah, okay. Yeah, cosine beta is plus or minus the square root of 1x squared. And then to make the decision, beta is sine inverse of x, so that means cosine beta is greater than or equal to 0. So that means cosine beta should be the principal square root of 1 minus x squared. Since the cosine of beta is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, now let's have a look at cosine. Wait, I said earlier sine of alpha plus beta. Okay. So our goal is to show that alpha plus beta ito pa rin equals pi over 2. Now sine of alpha plus beta should be sine alpha cosine beta. What's the next? Do you remember?
Minus. Ha 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 ha!
Minus or plus?
Minus. With all of the cells in my body. Sine beta, cosine alpha.
This is sine, so plus.
What?
Cosine ng mag-opposite.
Mm.
It's okay, it's okay. You know, it takes time.
My
Right?
life
Paulit-ulit.
is essentially ruined. Possibly.
No.
Devastated.
Okay. So, well, you know what? If you feel your life is ruined, let's make it better. Just copy paste ito. Like you feel sad, I'm gonna make you happier. Ito, I'm gonna copy paste a lot of this. Okay, and then more. Ayan, is it making you happy? Okay, yan pa. Ito pa, ito pa.
Ano
All
ba?
right.
Na-cringe. It's the ultimate cringe po eh.
All right, sine alpha cosine beta plus, alam mo na ng next, no? So sine beta cosine alpha or cosine alpha sine beta. Ito, sine alpha is, ito, underline natin in green para makita natin. Sine alpha is, ito, sine alpha. The square root of 1 minus x squared. Cosine beta, ito, square root of 1 minus x squared. Sine beta, here, x. Cosine alpha, x.
The lines have been filled.
And so, ano lalabas? 1 minus x squared plus x squared. And so, therefore, sine of alpha plus beta
No.
is equal to 1.
Oh, it already.
Okay, 1. However, are we super done? Super done. Wow, I just made that up. Ganito. Our goal is to show that alpha plus beta is pi over 2. What we ended up with is the fact that sine of alpha plus beta is equal to 1. Does that mean automatically that alpha plus beta is pi over 2? Or not yet?
No, because there are an infinite number of other angles.
Yes, yes, you're right. Okay, who's to say maybe alpha plus beta is actually pi over 2 plus 6 pi. So 3 further complete revolutions. Who's to say maybe that's the case? All right.
Sequence it's a million pi.
So there are infinitely many choices of angles for which their sine is equal to 1. So what we're going to do is go back to our definition of alpha and beta, because alpha and beta are not just any numbers. They are the outputs of a cosine inverse and a sine inverse. All right. Since alpha is cosine inverse of x, then that means alpha can be found in which quadrants?
First and second.
So that means alpha is between 0 and pi.
This is
Now, on the other hand,
cosine, it should be cosine. First and fourth. Wait, what? Yes,
Beta is sine inverse of x.
the x should be
Then beta is, yeah, sa anong quadrants?
first and fourth.
Or at least what range? All right, so negative pi over 2 going to pi over 2. These imply that alpha plus beta
Not to be equal to.
is from negative pi over 2 until 3 pi over 2. Pi plus
Pi over 4.
3 pi over 2. Sorry, negative pi over 2 pala. Negative pi over 2. So ibig sabihin, no, alpha plus beta can only come from here. Sorry, negative pi over 2. Okay, negative pi over 2 going around until 3 pi over 2. But within that range, from negative pi over 2 until 3 pi over 2, how many angles are there for which the sine is equal to 1? Marami ba o isa lang?
There's only one.
And what is that angle?
Exactly pi over 2 po.
All right. So there you
Pinpointed.
go. Then sine of alpha plus beta is equal to 1. And alpha plus beta is between negative pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Then we are sure that alpha plus beta is equal to pi over 2. Therefore, cosine inverse of x plus sine inverse of x is always going to be equal to pi over 2 no matter what.
So this is interesting. The inverse cosine and the sine po are literally just complements of each other.
Yes.
But
Yes.
here's the problem po. Since does this mean the tangent, inverse tangent and the inverse cotangent will also be equal to some special number, or the other ones will be too?
Actually, pi over 2. I will write it down later. Cotangent inverse of x plus tangent inverse of x is also going to be equal to pi over 2.
Wow, it exists.
Okay. Ganito, let me write something. Well, actually, I do not want to write everything all down, nor do I want to graph again. Okay, so let me being lazy here. Okay,
No.
I'm just gonna paste something.
At least it wasn't copied from here. Yes.
Yeah. Paste ko na lang. Today is so February 22 na page. I've opened it in the other laptop kasi the reference is in the other page. Tapos let's continue with inverse trigonometric function computation. So again, we're not using a calculator kasi calculator work is just calculator work. Okay, you're just punching things. So you're just punching things into a device. Okay, should appear shortly.
Well, you're
Yeah.
just punching things into the device po when I have to punch in literally 500 characters.
Tapos hindi naman kailangan. Ito. So it's a summary of the features of the 6 inverse trigonometric functions. So ganito. The rationale was we start with the cosine inverse function. So we started with the original. Okay, the original y equals cosine x on its own, not one-to-one. So what we did is we thought of restricting the domain over an interval where the sine is greater than or equal to 0. So quadrants 1 and 2. So we chose 0 to pi. And the range is from -1 to 1. So for the inverse cosine function, the domain 0 to pi became its range, and the range down here, -1, 1, became its domain. So the choice is so that the partner function sine of y is greater than or equal to 0. And so for the sine inverse, the next column, we already made that decision. Now, for the inverse tangent function, so if we take the original to be the tangent function, we need to restrict the domain in order for us to get a curve which is going to satisfy the horizontal line test. So if you recall, the graph of the tangent function has lots of vertical asymptotes, but the ones closest to the origin are going to correspond to x equal to -pi/2. The other horizontal asymptote, x equals pi/2. And then the specific branch within those two asymptotes is going to be this.
Meron po siyang
Okay.
horizontal asymptote?
Sorry, I meant vertical asymptote. I meant vertical asymptote. So the restriction we're going to consider for the tangent function is the following domain, -pi/2 going to pi/2. The range of the blue curve is from -infinity to +infinity, or the set of all real numbers. If we switch those two sets, we will get the domain and the range respectively of the inverse tangent function, where it is worth pointing out that the interval -pi/2 to pi/2 is the range, is the set that we want y to be in. And incidentally, for such values of y, the secant of y is going to be greater than or equal to 0. The secant is
No.
the partner of the tangent function in as much as, so remember, tangent squared theta plus tangent squared theta
Nakainis,
plus 1
actually
equals,
nakainis po eh. Why
ano
is
yan?
the, why is the cofunction of the tangent the cotangent, and it's also its reciprocal, where its technical real partner is the secant.
Again, wait, did you mention reciprocal? There are no reciprocals here.
Ano po?
So, di ba?
Why is the cotangent the cofunction of tangent when it's technically cofunction is the secant?
Wait, sorry, what's that? Why is the
Why is the cotangent po the cofunction of the tangent when the secant is more related to the tangent than the actual cotangent?
one go that I'm not sure of. Pero from this identity is useful in calculus. All right. So that's why when defining the tangent inverse, we choose it so that secant of y is going to be greater than or equal to 0. And likewise, for the secant inverse of x, I'm not going to talk anymore much about cotangent inverse and cosecant inverse, because it's going to be a similar story with the tangent inverse and the secant inverse. So let me, at least as far as this table is concerned, talk about the secant inverse of x, and then after this, problem solving na ulit tayo. Now, ganito. So nung secant inverse of x, and defining it, okay, so let me use orange. Okay, y equals secant of x. So nung graph niya, how is its graph gonna look like anyway? Ay, tinora ko. Anyway,
Alright.
sige.
What if you just do undo po?
Oo nga, hindi. Ito, na-erase ko na. Alright. So, ito nung 1 and -1. Diba? -1 and 1. Tapos, nung cosine function, cosine of 0 is equal to 1. So, that's one point that we have. Okay. Tapos, this is at pi. And, sorry, ito nung pi, and ito nung 2 pi. Tapos 2 pi, negative 2 pi here, and then negative pi here, positive pi. So ano ngayon nung graph ng secant function, the reciprocal of cosine? So where cosine is 0, secant will be undefined. So where cosine intersects the x-axis, there would correspond a vertical asymptote for the secant function. Okay, tapos we get for secant this, and then this, and then that. And the vertical asymptotes are as expected. Ngayon, to define the secant inverse function, what we need is a part of the graph of the secant function in green, which will pass the horizontal line test. So at the same time, we want the partner function, the tangent, to be greater than or equal to 0. But tangent is positive in quadrants 1 and 3. So yun ang kukunin natin. So asan yun? Ito, quadrant 1, from 0 to pi over 2. Okay, ito yun eh. 0 to pi over 2, first quadrant. And well, nung second quadrant, from negative pi over 2 going to pi, ito nung next na red segment on the x-axis, I'm gonna do it later. Well, we get another part of the graph of secant, which will pass the horizontal line test. However, we're gonna choose to skip the second quadrant and go to the third quadrant. Ito. This is what we're gonna take. Okay, so when we determine which graph of the secant function are we going to retain, which we will then reflect to get the graph of the secant inverse, it would have to be the red portions corresponding to angles in quadrants 1 and 3, because we want tangent of y to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so that's why for secant of x, nung domain niya, 0 to pi over 2, and then we skip pi over 2 to pi. We go next to pi and 3 pi over 2. Okay, we excluded pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 because for those angles, pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2, cosine is 0, which means secant is not defined. Kasi that would be 1 over 0. Okay, so that's the explanation for these intervals. So in fact, I'm gonna delete. Sige, all right. Sige, dinrawing ko na eh, ba't ko i-delete? Example. Or actually, ganito. I'm gonna put green marks. Hindi, mamaya na lang ng green marks sa dulo. Parang things to do when you happen to have time for it. Let's evaluate cosine of twice tangent inverse of 4/3 without using a calculator, of course.
Oh no.
But hey, do you see the strategy that we've been doing for these computations? Ano ginawa natin? Ito, this example, cosine inverse of x, call that alpha or beta. Ito, sine inverse of 1/4, call that beta. Sine inverse of negative 1/2, call that alpha. So going back here, anong Greek letter ang gusto mong gamitin? Alpha, beta, or gamma, delta? What do you want to use?
Zeta and Omicron. Or
I
Delta.
regret asking you. Why don't? Okay,
Delta and
Joshua,
Omicron.
I'm not gonna ask you again.
We
Okay.
must honor the we must honor the pandemic. Zeta,
Okay.
Delta and Omicron.
Okay. Okay. Forget me asking you again. Okay, di na kita tatanungin. Let alpha be tangent in. pahirapan mo pa ako sa, okay, let alpha be tangent inverse of 4/3. So this is what we're after. Cosine of twice alpha. Cosine of twice alpha. Incidentally, because alpha is tangent inverse of 4/3, then this means tangent alpha is equal to 4/3. Okay. So, well, we're interested ultimately in the value of cosine 2 alpha. There are various expressions for this. One is 2 cosine squared alpha minus 1. Of course, you also have cosine squared alpha minus sine squared alpha. But what I wrote there will suffice. Because, I mean, hey, if cosine squared alpha is 1/4, then sine squared alpha would simply be 3/4. Kasi di ba cosine squared alpha plus sine squared alpha would add up to 1. So I think this is enough. Twice cosine squared alpha minus 1. But hey, we have this particular tidbit of information that tangent alpha is equal to 4/3. Okay, can you describe to me how we can finish the solution?
Impossibility.
Come on. All right. So we want cosine squared alpha. Ganito. We know the value of tan alpha. What trig function value can we more easily determine next?
Second alpha.
Yeah. All right.
From
Because
second alpha, we can find cosine alpha.
there you
Oh, I
go.
can see the roadmap. The roadmap is emerging.
You see, you just had to pause for a bit. This is 1 plus tangent squared alpha, 1 plus 16 over 9, and this is 25 over 9. Sorry, secant squared alpha. Hey, do we need to take the square root? Is it necessary for what we're doing? Kailangan ba natin
Hindi na po.
mag-take ng square root? Hindi na, kasi di ba cosine squared alpha nung kailangan natin eh. So secant squared alpha is 25 over 9. So that means cosine squared alpha is 9 over 25. So right away, we have twice 9 over 25 minus 1, giving us negative 7 over 25.
The calculator displayed po negative 7 over 25.
Yes. So you can tell the calculator, good job, calculator.
you found the when you find it when in exact form.
Exact siya. Kasi, well, this is rational. Ito, let's try cosine of cosecant inverse of negative square root of 3. Let theta naman. Okay, napansin mo hindi na kita tinanong ng angle ha. Ayoko na. All right. So let theta be cosecant inverse of negative square root of 3. So that means this is, well, the cosecant of theta is negative square root of 3.
Sana ginamit na po phi o kaya mahirap yung sila. C.
Ayun na po. All right. So cosecant, so okay, this is what we're after, cosine of theta. So tell me, how can we proceed from here? Well, from cosecant, what can we easily determine right away? What trigonometric value?
Sine.
Yeah, sine is negative 1 over the square root of 3.
Cosine is the co-function of sine. Ha! I did it.
Well, yeah, so cosine, well, at least for now, cosine squared theta is equal to 1 minus sine squared theta, 1 minus 1/3, so 2/3. And so this means cosine theta is plus or minus the square root of 2/3. But can we make a determination between plus and negative? Sige, tell me how we can choose.
Um, uh, cosecant.
Okay, gusto mo akyat tayo dito? Theta is a cosecant.
So, cosecant.
So ano nung output ng cosecant? Dapat, if y is cosecant inverse, cotangent is greater than or equal to 0.
So,
Which means, anong quadrants matatagpuan si cosecant? Quadrant numbers,
quadrant. Wait. Cotangent is. When is cotangent positive?
yeah. Well, cotangent is reciprocal of tangent.
There's the same sign. So it will be the same as tangent. So
Yeah.
tangent is positive first quadrant
And
and first quadrant and wait lang.
saan pa? Sige. Where are tangent and cotangent positive?
Iniisip ko po kasi yung graph, yung may mga quadrants, sine sa taas, tapos yung cosine dito. Tangent, ano po, second and fourth. Or, ano ba, baliktad. The sine and cosine should have opposite signs.
Well, actually, the same sign dapat.
Opo. Dapat the same sign kasi positive.
Oo.
Where are the same sign? First and third quadrant po.
Yes. All right, first and third quadrants. So, so this means theta is in quadrant 1 or quadrant 3. However, does that really help us with choosing cosine theta's value as plus or negative? Hindi, no? Kasi if theta is in the first quadrant, well, cosine is positive. But if theta is in the third quadrant, then cosine will be negative. But ganito, theta as a cosecant means theta is in quadrants 1 or 3. But how about the fact that cosecant theta is negative square root of 3?
What is the consequence? What has the consequence if cosecant is negative?
Yeah. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine.
So it does the same as sine. So it's in the first and second quadrants.
Wait, ang sine is, where is it negative?
Third and fourth.
All right. So
So
therefore,
the third quadrant.
all right, okay. So we should be in the third quadrant. Therefore, theta is in the third quadrant. And so what's cosine theta now? It's positive or negative?
Negative po.
Negative square root of 2 over 3. Okay? So nung pag-compute cosine squared theta as 1 minus 1/3 equal to 2/3, madali lang yun eh. That doesn't really require much analysis beyond knowing the formula. But see where it actually doesn't end with the formula, and some form of analysis had to be done here. So cosine theta is.
When you realize po the cosecant, the inverse cosecant is totally unrelated to the sine negative one, so I can't use it on my calculator.
Check mo, is it negative square root of 2/3?
I don't have a cosecant negative one.
Wala. See, ito mo, hindi na kaya. Tinawanan. All right. Okay. Ito, show the following. 2 tangent inverse of 1/3 minus tangent inverse of negative 1 over 7 is equal to pi over 4. Okay. I think ito kayang i-calculator. Check mo nga. 2 tangent negative pi over 3.
45 po, which is pi over 4.
Yeah. All right. And we know it's exact. Ito. So as usual, let alpha be tangent inverse of 1/3, and beta, let it be tangent inverse of negative 1 over 7. Okay, so these imply tangent alpha is 1/3 and tangent beta is negative 1 over 7. In fact, before we proceed, let's try to figure out the mga quadrants nila. Can you tell me what quadrants we're going to find these angles in, alpha and beta?
Alpha. So, it is positive. So, it is in the first and third.
Yeah.
Where areas, I don't know else. Nothing else anymore.
All right. So alpha is in quadrants 1 or 3, correct? Now use the fact that alpha is an inverse tangent.
If alpha is an inverse tangent, so what's its consequence?
Meron dapat
Cosecant.
magiging positive.
There's a second. The second will be the consequence. So the second, which is basically the cosine, essentially, is positive.
Yeah.
So it means it's in the first or fourth quadrant.
Yeah.
So, since we already knew that it's in the first or third quadrant, it must be in the first quadrant.
All right. Alpha is in the first quadrant. How about beta?
Negative. So it must be in the second or fourth. But still, the consequence of the cosine, so it must be in the must be in the second or third. So it must be in the second quadrant.
So sorry, which quadrant?
Second quadrant po.
Wait, tangent, because tangent is negative, right? Tangent beta is negative 1 over 7. But we have two choices, diba, for tangent to be negative.
Opo.
The second and fourth quadrants.
Opo.
So you're saying it should be in the second quadrant and not the fourth quadrant.
Opo.
Pero diba, because beta is a tangent inverse, that means the secant of beta should be positive.
It must be positive, so cosine must be first or fourth.
Yeah.
Fourth? Wait,
yes, the fourth quadrant. All right.
Kahit na ano po pala po yung sign, dapat positive lagi.
Okay. So it definitely is something that needs practice. So I'll try to see if I can write something down. So, okay. Twice tangent. So ganito. Let's have a look at siguro i-tangent natin nung 2 alpha minus beta. Okay. So gusto natin ipakita, we want to show that 2 alpha minus beta is pi over 4. So to try natin. Well, this would be tangent of 2 alpha minus tangent of beta over 1 plus tangent 2 alpha and then tangent beta. Actually, tangent beta's value is given negative 1 over 7. We know the tangent alpha is equal to 1/3. What appears here is tangent twice alpha, but it's okay because we can figure out tangent 2 alpha's value. Twice tangent alpha over, what's the denominator going to be?
1 minus. Yes.
Yeah, 1 minus
Yes! Finally, I'm correct. Tangent, tangent alpha.
tangent squared.
Bro,
Right?
like
Ano
it.
natin? Kasi tangent of x plus y equals tan x plus tan y over 1 minus tan x tan y. So that's what we used here, where x is 2 alpha and then y is beta, pair subtraction rather than addition. So it's subtraction here. And so for tangent to alpha this time, just set x and y both equal to alpha.
Opo.
So that's why in the numerator, twice tangent alpha, in the denominator, 1 minus tan alpha times itself. So 1 minus tangent squared alpha. So this is twice 1/3 over 1 minus 1 over 9. Let's multiply by 9 over 9. So we're going to get in the denominator 8, and up here 6. 2/3 times 9, so we get 3/4. So going back here to tangent 2 alpha minus beta, we have 3/4 minus negative 1 over 7 over 1 plus 3/4 times negative 1 over 7. I'm not in the mood to combine denominators, so I'm just going to multiply by 28, both the numerator and denominator. 3
Literally.
times 7, yeah, plus actually 4 over 28 minus 3. 21 plus 4, 25. 28 minus 3, 25, 1.
No!
So what we've ended up with is the fact that, okay, tangent to alpha minus beta is equal to 1. However, is that enough to prove that 2 alpha minus beta is in fact pi over 4? I mean, it's consistent with the claim 2 alpha minus beta is pi over 4. However, there are infinitely many angles having a tangent equal to 1. So how do we show with finality that 2 alpha minus beta is in fact pi over 4 and none of the other angles?
The main
So
range.
this is where we may have to go back and consider that, hey, alpha is in quadrant 1, beta is in quadrant 4. So let's see what that will imply. Alpha is in the first quadrant, so alpha is between 0 and pi over 2. And then beta is in quadrant 4. And as a tangent inverse function, okay, beta is going to be from, tama ba? The beta is in the fourth quadrant. Okay, yeah. Nung output ng tangent inverse, bumalik ako dito. So negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So, okay, negative pi over 2 going to 0. So let's see what the implications are. 2 alpha is between 0 and pi. On the other hand, negative beta will be greater than 0 and less than pi over 2. Therefore, 2 alpha minus beta is greater than 0 and less than pi plus pi over 2, which is 3 pi over 2. So unfortunately, that's going to be the span that you see here. Okay, 2 alpha minus beta here. However, it's not the end of the story because, well, 2 alpha minus beta can be pi over 4, or 2 alpha minus beta
But at
can
least
still be
instead of an infinite
3.
number of choices po, we've gone down to two choices.
Yeah, at least we are down to 2 choices. So that's progress. However, we're not done yet with the problem, which is why I'm going to leave this for you to think about.
Even
Yeah. Okay. Or so try natin i-figure out kung maisip natin. Parang ano eh,
the
ibig
most
sabihin
evil, that's
nito,
the most evil thing po I've ever seen in my life. My life is
okay,
officially destroyed, obliterated, like
ganito. Anyway, this shows that maybe pwede mong gawin. Okay, we have come up with these two choices. Maybe you could try, hey, what is cosine of 2 alpha minus beta? Because if, no, kunwari, cosine of 2 alpha minus beta, what if it turns out to be negative? And that means it must be 3 pi over 4. What if cosine 2 alpha minus beta is positive? Then that lets us choose pi over 4 definitely. So you may look into things like that. Okay, or instead, how about the sine of 2 alpha minus beta? Okay, so I'm gonna leave that for you to ponder. And if you come up with something, that's great. That's fine. Even if what I come up with is probably shorter, but
if
at
it
least you get to
involves,
appreciate.
does it involve po yung mga versine po?
No, 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 definitely not. All right. Sige, Joshua and Sergey, have a good evening.
Apo.
Good evening po. Ay,
Thank you
sir,
po.
Okay.
Ay,
may tatanong po ako. Tanong mo na yung record.
All right. Is it about the resume? Sorry, I haven't really done